Yo, so yeah, check out this ad. I wanted to share this with you. Derek just sent this to me, and the thoughts I'm about to share with you aren't anything new to me. These are thoughts that I've gone down deep in, a really long time ago. But to be totally honest, it kind of kickstarted a fantasy of me actually communicating this via video to you, because I think it's going to be probably pretty mind expansive for you, or at least maybe bring you back to something that you already understand. But it's like, yeah, you know what, shit, this should be something that's talked about in the world today. So anyway, as you can see from this ad, it's basically just pay money, get featured in a well-known, reputable publication. That's the gist. In this instance, it's this magazine. But this kind of stuff exists all over the place. Like anyone that's in the marketing world, whether you're doing product brand marketing or personal brand, building up your own a human brand or an organization brand, whatever it is, this is super common. This is a fundamental marketing strategy that ultimately anyone that reaches a certain level has to do in order to keep on doing that level, and that is essentially paying money to get featured into publications, because it's not necessarily just the exposure that you get from being in the publication, but it's then your ability to create your own content saying that you were featured in this publication. We do this, I think this is kind of sketchy a little bit in a lot of ways, but we do it. We do it with our product brands. You have to. It's how it's done. When you see a product brand that says as featured in Forbes magazine, it could have literally even just been an ad. Literally they just paid for a half-page ad. I forget what Forbes' rate right now is, but Men's Health used to be $7,500 for a half-page ad. And then you can say you're featured in Men's Health magazine. I could do that even with my personal brand. Brandon Middleton was featured in Men's Health magazine. All I really did was pay $7,500. But you can also do paid articles. So not just an ad, but I'm actually paying for a space where either there's multiple systems to do this, where either A, one of their writers will write about me or interview me or whatever, or what is way more common but also more expensive is they'll even let me write it, and then I send it to them, and then they'll put one of their authors as the name and call it a ghostwriter. That's kind of a behind the scenes term. So pretty sketchy stuff, right? And this is common. I'm not just trying to slam this one publication. This is common across all of them, and it goes to even the highest of high-level scales. In fact, not only is this happening in the more business world where you're trading, you're paying for this stuff, but it happens even in the more elite world, like celebrities and stuff like that. But now it's not necessarily a celebrity paying money to People's Magazine or whatever. I mean, I should probably not use names just in case this video gets really popular. So I'm just using People's Magazine as a well-known publication, not insisting that any specific publication does anything. But yeah, so even in the celebrity level, what ends up happening is instead of a trading of money, there's other negotiations, and there's just other variables. Would it be good for us, if you're the publication owner, would it be good for us to feature this person because that person's fan base is going to be supportive of it, and then we're going to basically suck in some of their following. So you create these symbiotic relationships in that way. Or, we'll do this for you, but, a year from now when you are speaking at whatever event, you have to talk about, how great our publication is. You create these trades. So ultimately, it's politics. The whole world is run by politics at the smallest scale. If you don't have any political value, you don't have a following, you don't have a fan base, you don't have a voice, essentially, then you're trading money. And as soon as you have this value, then you can start trading other things, those symbiotic relationships. But all that happens behind the scenes, and in fact, once you get to a certain level, then you have managers, or actually you have publicists that do this for you. This is this is what a publicist does. They are doing these kinds of negotiations. So like, it even goes into like the movie industry, sticking with the celebrity concept, where it's like, okay, which actor should we feature for this role? Yeah, there are other variables. This isn't the single only variable, but it's like, okay, well, we want this movie to do really well with women between the ages of 18 and 34. So then they have these, consider it like a database where they're like, okay, what is everyone's, highly engaging following and fan base for this particular demographic that this movie is going off of? And then you have like, maybe like 3 actors or whatever, and then that's your short list for who you want into the movie. And if you're an actor, you're like, okay, how do I expand my fan base into women between the ages of 18 and 34? They love to watch this show, like this talk show or whatever. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna stay away from saying names. I'm gonna go contact blah 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 and make sure I can get on that show. And so like, there's this string. It's not just like a one-on-one negotiation. There is so much built-out strategy in order to build value based on demographics and customer base and all these kinds of things, and that ultimately everything becomes politics. In fact, even politics operates this way. At least most forms of politics, especially democracy, large-scale democracy. And that's honestly like, well, here, I'll go down that path a little bit first. So even in politics, it's the exact same thing. It's, okay, who has command of this particular demographic? Because we need that demographic to vote us in order for our agenda, the people that we've placed into our agenda. And by the way, that is how politics works. It's not a bunch of like, every politician is an individual. No, they congregate together, they create, okay, what are you wanting, what are you wanting, what are you wanting? And then they create this agenda, and it's, we collaborate and we build a massive PR campaign in order to recruit those voters. And by the way, yeah, you're sitting there thinking like, oh, well, it still always comes down to the voter. Well, not really, especially not anymore, especially not with like social media and even before social media, the news and stuff like that, because it is honestly so easy to ultimately emotionally trigger any single individual into believing ultimately anything. And I know you're sitting there thinking like, well, I get that for most people, but not me. All right, well, even me, who understands this stuff. In fact, I was like looking through my Google News feed just a second ago, and I got served some article that like said that 2 people, like Kanye West and Antonio Brown, football player, were considering buying the Denver Broncos, like wanted to buy the Denver Broncos. And first of all, I was like, why the hell am I getting served this article? Like, I really don't care about like professional sports too much, and like this doesn't relate to me at all. And then I was like, wait a minute, shit, I know what happened. Yesterday, I was on Instagram going through a couple stories, and I accidentally, I was about to like one of my friend's stories, and then it flipped to the next story, and I liked some rando person's story that was actually about this particular topic. So yes, Instagram collects my data, feeds it to Google. They are all in collaboration with data. So Google knew exactly to feed me that article, thinking that I'd be interested in it. Turns out I was not, but just like, all I saw was like the headline and like the first like 3 sentences. I was triggered because the author was like really slamming Kanye West and Antonio Brown, like talking how they can't afford it and like they're terrible people and blah, 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 blah. And like, I was emotionally triggered, like, yeah, fuck those guys. I was like, wait a minute, I don't give 2 shits about this. Like, holy shit. And not to mention, like, you guys might think I'm crazy, but you better believe that the technology of being able to read facial expression and body language while you're looking at your phone is being used and is communicating to these content creators, not content creators, but content like providers or whatever, to understand what our emotions are as we're reading different types of stuff, and which of our emotions as individuals triggers us the most to engage, to purchase, to do all these different things. So if you're Instagram, what's going to trigger me the most to start engaging in Instagram, whether it's content creation or engaging in someone's post or whatever, because that is all value to them. That's measurable, quantifiable value to the Instagram platform. It increases their valuation, increases their social worth, when they go to all these other organizations like Google saying, hey, let's trade data. Okay, well, how valuable is your data? How valuable is my data? You know, it all plays into that. And what's really unfortunate is it's the negative emotions that trigger people the most to engage. So unfortunately, we're trapped in this world of being fed negativity constantly because it's what is ultimately the most profitable. Both profit from like the thinking in terms of actual money, but also profit in terms of us sharing our attention, our headspace, our energy to these platforms, because that can get translated into value when they go into negotiation mode with other tech industries, governments. You better believe that our tech industry also works with, like, say, the NSA, National Security Agency. When, you know, the NASA really needs a whole slew of data to prevent something from happening, well, boom, now there's a negotiation saying, okay, we'll give you this data, but you know that privacy law that you guys are talking about? We're going to need that repealed. Yeah, and that's how our litigation, that's how our, what's the word here? Like our laws and shit are written. It's so fucked up. That's how everything operates. And what really sucks is it's never for the commonwealth of the people. Everything is in support of some individual's agenda, or it's an organization, you know, whether it's a business or a religion. Not to shit on religions, but, you know, every organization has an agenda. And all organizations understand these concepts, how to play politics and how to manipulate the individual. That is where the power sort of comes from. I say sort of again because if you're speaking to the Americans right now, if you're a Republican or a Democrat, don't you think it's kind of weird how pretty much all Republicans seem to vote mostly along party line, how all Democrats seem to vote across all party line, but there's pretty much nothing else in existence of like human interests where it is so easy to just be like, you're either in this pool or it's that pool? Well, it's because if you're a Republican or if you're a Democrat, you've basically chosen your media source, your way of absorbing information, and you're just constantly being programmed. And I know you're not programmable, but the rest of the world is. I am. It's how it happens. In fact, that's part of our biology as human beings. In fact, I communicate that is the thing that separates us from every other living thing in known existence, is we are basically these blank slated computers that are biologically set up to be programmable. You may have heard words like neuroplasticity and stuff like that. I mean, literally anything about yourself as a human can ultimately be changed, whether it's physical, emotional, spiritual, intellectual. Did I say physical? Yeah, obviously physical. You know, all these different things. Everything can be changed, and what the one beauty of being a human being is all about is we can also self-program. So that's what's really awesome about being a human, but the downside is we are so susceptible to programming that if we're not aware that we're being programmed, well, then we've given up basically on power as an individual. And so we're now trapped in this world, worldwide, where everything is a negotiation, everything is politics. What food you eat, that's politics, because laws are created around this stuff. The marketing campaigns were built around this. In fact, another thing I like to talk about is how, you know, my parents' generation, they ultimately were fed their health information, what they believed was like healthy for foods, for diet, from big corporations. You know, like got milk, it increases calcium and prevents osteoporosis. There's like a pretty good Netflix documentary on Big Sugar and how they actually uncovered letters from like CEOs of huge sugar corporations, private letters between them and congressmen, basically fudging statistics, fudging studies to basically say that fat was the enemy and not sugar, and then that is what created the United States' food pyramid back in, what was it, like the 70s or something like that, that basically had sugar as like the bottom rung, that is the foundational piece of our diet. So like literally these little, like, we hear that now and we're like, holy shit, that's nuts. Like sugar is, well actually now we're programmed to believe sugar is the devil. It's not, nothing is the devil. But that's how we're being programmed now, and I'll get into that too. So like our parents' industry, they were being programmed by big business. And then now in current generation, we know to be skeptical of big business. But now we're believing that like the best way to get our information is ultimately like from influencers. And if you're like, I don't get my information from influencers, well, change the name of influencer, because maybe you just have like your own program to like hate the word influencer, because I know a lot of people are annoyed with like people taking photos of themselves in like weird places and how fake it is and blah, 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 blah. But basically everyone's an influencer. Like Joe Rogan, influencer. I mean, I think that guy's awesome, but like, you know, he's still an influencer. He still, you know, creates programming as we all do by just, you know, feeding information. I think he's very unbiased, but that's beside the point. So, you know, anyway, point being is today's generation is gaining their information from influencers and believing that it's fact-based because it's not coming from the big corporate. Well, here's how that works. This is going to be a hypothetical scenario. I don't know if this is actually true, but this is how it all could work. And you also got to imagine, when you get to the top level, if you're running governments, or literally if you're someone in an organization that supersedes governments, you are literally above worldwide governments. You are transacting, playing politics, and negotiating with multiple governments, stringing governments together. Because there are people that do that, World Bank and shit like that. They're playing all those games. So if you're at that level, you are thinking along these lines, or in fact, you have lower level employees that are thinking along these lines that I'm about to communicate to you right now. Because this is so small, to us it's big, but this is so small to them that it's just a little drop in the bucket of what needs to happen to feed their massive agenda. So, white rice. Americans are programmed to believe that white rice is the worst thing on the planet, and I was one of these people. I was a bodybuilder for a while, like amateur, powerlifter, you know, hardcore athlete, all these things, and during those days, you know, I was constantly fed information about how, you know, it's high glycemic and blah, 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 and, you know, this and that, this and that, this and that. And then I moved to Bali and spent just a lot of time in Southeast Asia, and my white rice became a staple in my diet. Meanwhile, I always loved white rice. I was staying away from a food that I loved, and I kind of always knew that it made me feel good, especially with sushi and shit like that. But, you know, I was programmed to believe it was terrible, so I avoided it. Anyway, got to Bali, and I was just like pounding white rice, like every meal, sometimes even white rice by itself. And I was like, man. And by now I wasn't a bodybuilder or anything, and like I just had this shredded physique, and maintained it pretty much effortlessly. It didn't make any sense compared to how much like energy I used to spend working out and all that shit versus what I was spending there, which, you know, I'm always active, but, you know, it's way, way different. I was like, man, shredded physique. And that got me spiraling down this thought process. I was like, okay, well, why are Americans believing that white rice is so bad for you? So all it really takes, and again, this is a hypothetical. I don't know this particular thing to be fact. It just wouldn't surprise me. So does the United States produce white rice? No. Who does produce the majority of the world's white rice in the economy? China. Who is the United States government? And I want to specify government because I don't want to say Americans, because trying to pit people against people, that's all part of the programming. I know Chinese people. Every single Chinese person that I know is awesome. I'm sure there's plenty that suck, but all the ones that I know are awesome. So anyway, American government, Chinese government, which is, when we say American government, really it's this like mixed bag of like really big corporations, because that's who's pulling the strings, that's who's paying off the politicians and all that stuff to create our laws and to influence, you know, everything. So anyway, American government hates Chinese government. Chinese government, biggest exporter of white rice in the entire world. So, okay, what can we do? If you're the American government, you're like, all right, well, what are all the things that we can do to China without just doing war? It's like, okay, well, we could create, you know, sanctions, like trade sanctions. We could create, you know, like import taxes and stuff like that to make white rice more expensive, so people, you know, stop doing white rice. And instead, what's the substitute of white rice? Well, I mean, there's several, but one of the main ones is corn. Who's the biggest provider of corn in the entire world? United States. Okay, so if we do an embargo or any kind of sanctions against white rice, China's going to do an embargo and sanctions against corn. Well, that's not good. All right, what else can we do? let's program our people to not like white rice. Okay, cool. So we'll throw out a couple studies out there that say white rice is bad, because guys, if you believe studies, I know like that's been a hot topic, like, well, it's science. Well, look, science can be skewed, and it often is skewed, because at the end of the day, someone is paying for those studies, and someone has a way that those studies want to appear. I learned this really early on in my career with the dietary supplement industry, how bullshit studies are. But now I understand that to be on a high level. I'm not saying like every single scientist or any of that stuff is like bad. Like science is definitely good, and you know, there's good studies out there and blah, 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 blah. But we have to understand that every single scientific study, for the most part, there is a preferred conclusion, and it's almost impossible to control every single variable, especially when you're testing it on human beings. Because human beings are never just locking themselves in a room at some study, and every single human being already had a million other variables coming into the study, so it's basically impossible, and they all know this, but they don't care, because that's not what it's all about. It's not about the real information, it's about the conclusion that you can draw, that you can then use for marketing information. That's where I'm getting at, is it's all marketing, which is ultimately politics. So, okay, United States government, let's make sure we get some studies out there that say white rice is bad. You know, we can easily link it to diabetes. I mean, you overeat basically anything carb related, and it's linked to diabetes. So okay, that's an easy one. Let's do a bunch of diabetes studies with white rice, and then you know, let's. Sometimes white rice has arsenic in it, because in China there's a lot of like really shitty. In the United States too, everywhere there's a lot of shitty stuff in the soil, and you know the plants eat that. Like matcha tea, by the way. I'm going to do content on matcha tea. Be careful if you are a matcha tea drinker. But anyway, because a lot of lead. But so anyway, okay, well, even though there's only like 0.01% of white rice in the world has arsenic issues, let's just throw out a bunch of information about arsenic issues. Okay, cool, we did that. Okay, who's this information going to? Who do people listen to these days? Influencers. No, I'm not saying that the influencers are in on this, but if you are an influencer or any kind of content creator in general, you know what I'm talking about here. It is your job, like half of your day is, what content can I create? You're not really verbalizing. A lot of the content you create isn't necessarily something that you're super passionate on. It's mostly just shit that, like the rule of being a content creator is you gotta get something out there like every few hours. That's how the algorithms work. If you're in Instagram, or if you're in Facebook, YouTube, whatever, you know how the algorithms work, and there's basically a schedule of content creation that you have to put out there. That's why a lot of content creators do stuff like reposting stuff. It's the easiest way to make sure you just keep up the algorithm. Or like, as I start working on my personal brand, you'll probably start seeing me drop a lot of quotes. That's what I'm doing. I'll probably come up with 200 quotes that are really sweet. In fact, I'm going to have a team member help me find cool quotes that I think are sweet. So yeah, I will think they're sweet. And then I'm just going to say, hey, team member, whenever you see a lull in my posting, just throw some of these quotes out there. I'm going to do that. And now you know what I'm going to be doing. Yeah, I think they're sweet. They might create engagement, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, you need to have content to basically just continually throw out there. Everyone in the content world, big, little, everyone understands this. And then also, once something starts picking up steam, then you want to make sure that you are also communicating that. So basically, like, content creators are pretty much never innovators. Very few are innovators. Even most will pretend to be innovators, but still aren't really innovators. So they're really just like jumping on bandwagons because they're in the know of what people are currently engaging with. Like, holy shit, like psychedelics right now. Talk about psychedelics and the algorithms skyrocket. They go nuts. So like so many people right now are talking about ayahuasca or like medicinal mushrooms and all that stuff, which, you know, I think is great and I think that's good for the world, but there's marketing and politics being at play with that stuff. So anyway, everyone as a content creator, as an influencer, is in search of creating content. The US government knows this, everyone knows this. So all right, let's get those studies out there. Let's get them into a few of our, you know, the publications that they can control, that they know some other, like maybe Dr. Oz is, you know, like checking this shit out. So now all of a sudden Dr. Oz, I'm making up Dr. Oz, by the way. Dr. Oz is saying that white rice is bad, and a few other people are saying white rice is bad, and basically like if we were to get some influencer at the top saying white rice is bad, then basically let's say he has 10 million following, then his followers that have like 1 to 3 million following, they're like, oh shit, that guy's saying it, so I gotta say this too. And you create this pyramid effect, and everything trickles down. The people that are following the 1 and 2 million followers that might have like 500K, they're throwing it out there to the 100K people. The 100K people are throwing it out there. And then eventually you get people like me that have like less than 5,000 people, followers, are also just communicating that, just to kind of like, you know, it's like picking up scraps kind of thing. And that's how this works. This little like cascade of information flow is ultimately it. So none of these influencers were in on this whole like anti-white rice thing, like for any kind of agenda. They just needed content. They just needed something to talk about, because you can't sit there and talk about the same shit over and over again. In fact, that's also why you have counterculture being ultimately a pop culture now, but still called counterculture, is if you want to market a product, let's say there's someone like talking about like health benefits of honey. Well, you have to come up with what's called a UVP, a unique value proposition, or actually it's more common in today's marketing world to call it a USP, unique sales proposition, I believe. I like UVP, way sweeter, makes way more sense to me. So you have to come up with some UVP that basically steers everyone away from every other product that's out there so that they buy yours without you having to say buy mine. Because if you never say buy mine and you just talk about the product in general, people are going to be like, wow, they didn't even try to pitch their own product. So instead you said something like, oh, it can't be any old honey. It has to be Manuka honey. It can't be any old cinnamon. It has to be blah, like Ceylon cinnamon. And maybe there is some study that was on Manuka honey or on Ceylon cinnamon that said whatever it is that you're trying to say. And so you're always going to be able to base something in some level of fact. But ultimately the strategy is to create a UVP that basically says you can't buy anything else that's on the market, only my shit. And that's how it all works. So, going back to the white rice thing, we've now cascaded down that white rice is the ultimate devil. Americans should not eat white rice. And without having to create any kind of policy whatsoever, so therefore China has nothing to push back against. Now, you know, China's smart. They probably know what's happening. They're going to do their own programming on their people too. But ultimately, if we went to war with China, you know, that creates war. If we created sanctions, then China's going to do sanctions back to us. So instead, it's just easier to program our people. How do we program our people? Through marketing, through the systems that already exist, through social media, you know, through all these kinds of things. Once you start understanding how the world operates at this level, where we're just constantly in this, not we as, you know, normal people, but how the people that run the world, the people that create the really big jobs, the people that create the laws, the people that do all the weird behind the scenes shit. Once you understand that there is always an agenda, and if you want your agenda, then you have to basically collaborate with other people that also have sketchy ass agendas, so that basically we have, like, making up numbers here, but maybe like 0.1% of people in the world are ultimately dictating the like societal standards, laws, all these kinds of things, the way we live our lives. Once you start understanding that, that makes it pretty easy to understand also why, you know, if you have time to like sit by yourself at all and just kind of like sit there and be like, huh, what's going on in the world today? Someone just feels fucked up. The world is not right. What the hell? This is why. Because there's no one pushing for the commonwealth of people. Not at any high level, because those people can't succeed, and it's way too easy to silence those people. Way too easy. Because anyone creating change or trying to communicate change is going to get stopped by the current people, organizations, businesses, religions, or whatever that are currently holding power. And when I say power, I don't necessarily mean legitimate power, i.e. appointed positions. You know, like Facebook has, as I just talked about, so much power over you because they know exactly what triggers you, they know what creates engagement, they know what to feed you, like feed you as in terms of content, they know all these things. So people that have this power, our entertainment industry is so insanely powerful right now. In fact, I believe, I'm not really sure if this is a result or if this is intentional, but like right now, the United States entertainment industry is trying so hard to get into the Chinese market because it is monstrous compared to the American market. You know, more viewers, more subscribers, more whatever. And so in order to get into their markets, they are having to pass the Chinese government's filter system, their censorship. And therefore, a lot of content that we're now watching is censored by the Chinese government, which means the Chinese government now has the power to steer our culture. And I believe we can see that a lot. If you like, there's a lot of people that are like, man, like all the politically correct shit and like this huge thing about, like really going after the white man. Which, by the way, like the whole white man thing, it's like, dude, those fuckers in government right now do not represent me. I know a lot of white dudes that are fucking awesome, just like I know a lot of all other dudes and chicks and whatever that are all awesome. Those people aren't representative of us, but we need to attack something. We need to shift. This is China's thinking, maybe. We have to shift the cultural dynamics of the United States. This is true, actually. This is fact. There have been tons of, this is fact what I'm about to say. China is donating a lot of money to a lot of like different schools, like colleges and shit like that, in exchange for being able to change the curriculums that are being taught. So think about like if you're China thinking like, okay, how can we culturally take over the United States over the next like 100 years? Let's infect their entertainment. Let's steer their entertainment. Because think about it, like you watch shit online. I mean, you watch shit, read books, whatever, and you absorb a lot of those whatever you're being fed. Again, it's programming. We are designed to be programmed. We are like everything is going to program us unless you're aware of it programming you and you can stop it. If you are unaware, then it is going to program you. That's just how our biology works. So anyway, if you are China and I like to use the word infected the entertainment system or industry, you've infected the education system, you can ultimately, and you're using that to disrupt the current power structures that exist in the United States today, well, it's going to make things pretty easy to just slowly creep in. And I don't mean like, Americans are going to be hailing like the Chinese flag in, a few decades. That's not what I mean. They're not going to need that. They want America to basically take a back seat so that China can do its thing. And I'm not even blaming China for this shit. Like there's some evil organization. All the organizations are evil. The American organization, like the American government, and all these like big businesses that are pulling all the strings, all of them are evil. I mean, like democracy, that's the problem with democracy today, is it doesn't work when companies are able to get so big, and ultimately when you have career politicians that for their entire life, they are able to build these, okay, I'll do you this favor, but you're going to owe me a favor later, kind of mentalities. That's how we get like fucked. We as in the common people get fucked with all these systems being created that don't benefit us. Everything gets spun in a way that sounds like it benefits us. It gets spun in a way that sounds good for society, but that's just marketing too. And once you start understanding that kind of stuff, you can see the spin. It's super easy, but the spin is also what triggers people and gets people to engage. So ultimately, it's like, well, fuck, okay, now I get it. There's so much bullshit going on, now I get why. Well, what the fuck do we do? Because as I said, these power structures obviously don't want any change. They are crushing it exactly as is. So how do us common people disrupt this? What do we do? If we actually made any big pushes, we would get quelled or we would get reprogrammed and steered a different direction. There are a lot of people that like to think along these lines. If you're someone that has like a family, a bunch of kids, and a long hours, like corporate career with a long commute in traffic, chances are you're not able to come home and just like think, contemplate, meditate, whatever it is, sit with yourself and not be distracted. You probably don't have that lifestyle, but there are people that do. And those people are, like me, thinking pretty deeply about this kind of stuff. They're going to events, they're sharing ideas, sharing opinions. They're getting off of social media and going to decentralized networks for online communication and starting to share this stuff. So, like, what are the power structures doing now? Oh, well, let's find those individuals that fit into these buckets, but are so outrageously landish and have, are saying things that aren't founded at all and probably have like a mental health issue or something like that. And let's make them the poster child of whatever's being talked about and then call them a conspiracy theorist so that everyone else that is just, absorbing their content while they eat their Cheerios, their Facebook media while they're eating the Cheerios, are going to be like, yeah, these fuckers, what conspiracy theorists? What a bunch of idiots. Well, no, you're being programmed. You're being programmed because the world is fucked up. The world isn't right. It's the power structures that exist today. It's the people. I mean, at the very top, no one knows who the fuck is pulling those strings. I'm talking there are people above. There are probably like 10 more layers of organization of people above whatever you think is the highest level. And definitely, if you think the highest level is the different countries, like that's like mid-tier at best. So yeah, what do we do? What do we do? I don't know. Honestly, I don't know, but I'm working on it. I'm definitely working on it. I think there's going to be a solution through entrepreneurialism. I think we can change the way human beings organize in order to create value. I think we can decentralize ourselves so no individual human gains too much power, whether it's financial power or social power or whatever. I think there are solutions. I don't think every single human being is going to be ready for these types of systems. I think it's going to take a while, but I think some human beings are. And I am working on creating an organizational structure and a culture and an organization itself through business, right now, through business, that is basically going to guinea pig and try to evolve into something, some new system that bigger systems that actually give a shit can adopt, that is going to make sure that we are actually facing in the direction of what is good for the common person. Whoa. Right? I literally just got goosebumps. I don't know if you're going to be able to see. Not really. But, whoa. So, what can you do? I'm going to keep on sharing my ideas. I don't have much time to be doing this kind of stuff too much, so I'll be sporadic, I'm sure. But I'm going to keep on sharing my ideas. If you don't agree, that's cool too. Like, I'm more about creating a conversation because I'm going to keep on evolving my thinking. I don't have all the answers at all. I'm just going to keep on evolving my thinking. So if you disagree with anything, I'd like to hear from you. If you do agree, if this is pretty expansive to you, like give me some feedback because your energy is going to help feed me to do more of this, and I think this is going to be good for the world. I know it's kind of funny saying that because it's like, all right, dude, you're Brandon P. Middleton. Like, how are you going to do shit that's good for the world? Well, it all starts with one person, and I'm starting to network and find other people that think along my lines and have the brain type that can campaign and create, like, not just have the ideas, but actually put them into execution, build team around these ideas. I've done this very successfully in business. I've built, I don't know, over a dozen multi-million-dollar businesses, and I literally just turned 37 today. So I have those abilities. Step one is just trying to be aware. Try to be aware when things are programming you, and then let yourself be programmed. It's not don't be programmed. We are built for being programmed. Let yourself be programmed by the things that you think ought to program you. Ultimately, program yourself, and then try to create awareness when anything else is trying to program you. Even if you agree with the information, because that's part of being programmed. You're always going to agree with the information. So I would say especially when you agree with the information. Anytime something triggers you emotionally, if it's something that's being said by someone, like that you hear being said a lot, like what's the phrase, like the scuttlebutt? So scuttlebutt is a ship term for water fountain. So like in the corporate office, like around like the coffee maker or the water fountain is where people congregate and just like talk shit. So if ever there's a common theme to whatever's being talked about, like COVID, or right now, the Russia-Ukraine conflict, all these kinds of things, there's probably a significant amount of programming going on. In fact, one of my Russian friends just sent me a documentary that I'm pretty excited to watch that basically blames the United States for a lot of the Russian-Ukraine conflict. And it's not that I'm like anti-American, I'm not anti or pro anything. I am pro building awareness and trying to deprogram and reprogram myself, and I guess maybe now this is my start of helping others do the same. And so I'm not necessarily going to watch this documentary and be like, fuck the US, but I want to see programming on the other side. Because, I mean, if you are just sitting there saying fuck Russia, you probably don't have that much information. So, like none of us do. Like, I don't either. So, I do have this instinctual sense of anytime there's an aggressor, I want to back the person I want to defend. In fact, my number one archetype, I would say, is guardian. I feel that way. but I don't know what the politics are or any of that shit's going on. So it'd be cool to watch the documentary. But yeah, so if anything I'm saying, like, if it's interesting to you, let me know, because that's going to fuel me to keep on doing more of this. And like I said, I think it's good to do more of this. I definitely think it's good to do more of this. And if I can find someone that has a bigger voice than mine that I can like throw my support to, raise your hand, because that would be really beneficial so that I can focus more on creating the organization, the organizational structure, the culture, and all these things that are ultimately going to be what can replace what we currently have today with our government organizational structure, our corporate organizational structure, our religious organizational structure, all these different organizational structures that exist today that are like so low evolved. Human beings are better than that.